maybe not so much. So thanks for having us here today. I hope that you're all doing well. My colleague Michelle is here today to co-present and present with me from the Office of Early Learning. I wanted to just start by noting that I've worked with the RBERNs for many years. I started in the department in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, and I think they were called the BATAX or BTAX at that point. But the RBERNs have been part of our work with the standards reviews that we've been involved in, and of course, with our graduation requirements, but a really great partner and ally to the work. So when we're done here today, if there's something that piques your interest in terms of a future resource or a way for the RBERNs to be involved in the Office of Early Learning, then I would love for you to reach out to me with your suggestions so that we can hear what you're thinking of. So I'll launch into it here. First of all, as I mentioned, my name is Eric Sweet, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of Early Learning. It is an office that has grown from 9 when I started 2 years ago. And so that was 9 people overseeing and monitoring the, at that point, over 100 school districts for universal pre-kindergarten. So we're very happy that in the budget in the past 2 years, we've been expanded to a team of roughly around 25 with soon to be 30 members of the Office of Early Learning. That office group is mostly in Albany, but also we have a Brooklyn office and at Hanson Place in which we have 3 members of our team that are there. So I wanted to also give a special thank you again to the RBERNs for inviting us. The invaluable support that you give to supporting and serving multilingual learners is crucial in our work here at the department. So we're very happy to be able to bring you this update today. So next. So this is a picture of our office, of our management team in the next slide. We oversee technical support to school districts in the development, implementation, and evaluation of all pre-kindergarten to grade 3 programs. So we work closely with special ed, the Office of Bilingual, the Office of Standards Instruction, but also with some of our other partner agencies that we work with in the state, such as the Office of Children and Family Services, which oversees all the daycares from birth up to, I think, age 8, as well as the Council on Children and Families, and a variety of different organizations where we meet together and we work together. So part of what we do is not only working with the over 650 school districts for universal pre-K, but we also have partners that we work with so we can align this program in the state in a better way. A little known fact is we also do a voluntarily registered nursery schools and kindergarten support, which is a program where voluntarily registered schools can apply to us to gain that designation in their program. One other thing that we're heavily involved in, and we'll talk about it later, is the literacy work that the state is doing around pre-kindergarten to grade 3. So we're very excited to share some of that today and the recent resources that we've rolled out over the past year. I worked with Dr. Noni Lusseau from Harvard on literacy, and she also has a background in working with English learners. So we're very excited to share some of these with you today. But as you can see, this is our main office structure and what we do. Next, the main program that we oversee, which is a big responsibility. So whenever you see that amount, $1.2 billion, it definitely makes you realize it's a very important responsibility. So that flows through my office in terms of going straight to the over 650 school districts that implement UPK. But UPK has been around in different forms for the past couple of decades, and in fact started as, I think it was called experimental pre-kindergarten. And this program is wonderful for New York State. And it's wonderful because not only do we have around 116,000 to almost 120,000 4-year-olds in our program, but it is a free program for students. And it's a wonderful opportunity for students to have their first formal schooling in universal pre-kindergarten. Part of what we oversee is an application process. We oversee a final reports for UPK, all of the data that we have, the payments, and we are required by law to monitor over 200 of those districts. So we're out in the schools visiting. And with universal pre-kindergarten, not only do we have programs in school district buildings, but we have programs that are in collaborating partners, or as we call them, CBOs. And that is 10% of the budget for UPK for each school. They're required to work with collaborating agencies, which could be a YMCA program, a daycare, a non-public school that provides UPK. So we're out to see those. There are thousands of sites across the state, and we are happy to be in there to help and support. So the The other element of that I want to mention is that we have around 6,000 3-year-olds. We don't have a huge budget for 3PK, as we call it, but it's a very important part of the program, and we are excited to be releasing 3-year-old or 3PK standards that connect with the universal pre-kindergarten, the pre-K standards in age 4 pretty soon in the spring. That'll give all the 3PK programs, the daycares, the local programs a chance to see, well, what should be expected at this age for learning, obviously play, inquiry-based learning, and it helps align all the different pieces in our state for early childhood. So even though formal schooling doesn't start until compulsory age of age 6, we do need to work very closely together to make sure that students have a great, welcoming, supportive environment, and that includes our emergent multilingual learners, programs for students with disabilities, etc. So we have a lot of work we've done over the past year with UPK. One of the other things I'm excited about is we've brought forth several webinar series that are recorded that are around pre-kindergarten. So how to do all the fiscal part, how to oversee the application process, as well as 2 or 3 live events that we provided for navigating pre-K day, and we have our next one coming up in May. So we've done a lot to get right out there to help schools with this, and we're excited. So this is the start. The next slide takes us a little bit to what we've been talking about in the department in the very important New York Inspires, which is the Portrait of a Graduate. So I was part of the group, and I know the RBERNs have been involved in the graduation requirements work. So this exciting element of it connects really well to what the early childhood teachers and administrators know and have been doing for years, which is that inquiry-based learning and the type of learning where you think and you talk together and collaborate is a really natural way of learning, but it is also very good for thinking and inquiry and building knowledge. So in early childhood, where kids are moving from stations and they're working together, in high school, there are some tracks of learning where it's still very much lecture-based. And even though that's an important part of learning, the group that we brought together over the past couple of years to look at our graduation requirements have said that they feel that it's crucial for students as they're learning to try to move towards more project-based learning and learning that is more tailored to the student in terms of the tracks that they're going on. So we have a multi-year plan for moving to this new graduation requirements project, which as a center at it has a portrait of a graduate. And so if you look at this important graphic that we have here, our consultants, the groups that came in said, these are all things that we look for as a student graduates. So when you have them in the earliest ages and you bring them all the way up through school, these are what we're thinking about. One great connecting point to our work with diverse learners is global citizenship and thinking about different cultures, learning languages. Of course, being an effective communicator is important, starting from the first day when you learn this in pre-K or 3PK, and then moving all the way up to more of the content areas like being literate across math, science, arts, etc., thinking through problems. So we're excited that this direction is the direction the state's going in. And as I mentioned, the rollout will be a multi-year rollout that will involve looking at and making some adjustments to our learning standards. So that affects this group. Also talking about some of the unit of study credit requirements, they're moving away from that to have different ways that you can show how you graduate. And they have decided to decouple the Regents exam, a requirement that you need to pass those to graduate, from the requirements. So there will still be Regents exams and there will be available for students. However, it will not be connected to the actual requirement for graduation. They're looking more for a portrait as you walk across that stage at the end of being culturally competent, a critical thinker, well-versed across the content areas with your own social emotional competence. And that is the direction we're going in. And I wanted to bookend that with you with the start with the early learning ages all the way up to this. It's very important. So to share more about our work around EMLs and language acquisition, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Michelle Sidoti from the Office of Early Learning.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning, everyone. During the 2023-2024 school year, New York State districts identified nearly 30,000 EMLs, representing a 19% increase from previous years. Migration Policy Institute, also known as MPI, released data based on the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey for the years 2018 through 2022. MPI data captures children who have at least one parent who speaks language other than English at home, and New York State ranks third in the nation with 829,000 children under the age of 9 that have at least one parent who speaks a language other than English at home. 45% of these children in New York State are between the ages of 0 to 5. This is very significant in terms of diversity in early learning settings. Under Commissioner Regulations Part 117, all school districts are required to assess the home language of all students entering or re-entering the New York State public school system, pre-kindergarten through grade 12. The Office of Early Learning recommends using the Emergent Multilingual Learners EML language profile to carry out this important screening in pre-kindergarten. While districts have the flexibility to develop their own approaches for gathering this information during the screening, the EML profile is suggested as it is specifically designed for pre-kindergarten. This tool captures information about language use both in the home and beyond, as well as details about early childhood experiences, literacy, and the language goals of families. The EML profile is available in 24 languages. This slide shows the top 10 languages spoken by our pre-kindergarten English language learners, with Spanish being the most prevalent spoken by approximately 16,000 students. This data is self-reported by districts through the required annual UPK final report. During the 2023-2024 school year, we identified nearly 30,000 EMLs, representing a 19% increase from previous years. And this growth may not only be reflective of a rise in the EML population, but also improvements in how districts are gathering this important data. We understand that data is only valuable when applied effectively, and its true worth is found in how we use this data to foster culturally and linguistically responsive learning environments. Trends highlight a growing and diverse group of children and families, underscoring the need for environments that ensure all students and their families receive equitable, relevant instruction and support. Any student who is or aims to become language diverse, regardless of their proficiency in English, can be considered a multilingual learner. Many of us are multilingual learners by heritage or by academic experience. Heritage speakers of world languages fall under the umbrella of multilingual learners in New York State, and this include our emergent multilingual learners in pre-kindergarten. Data trends highlight a growing and diverse group of children and families, underscoring the need for culturally responsive school environments that ensure all students and their families receive equitable and relevant instruction as well as support. EML students may or may not be later identified as ELLs when they get to kindergarten. So rather than quantifying or assessing levels of English, we seek to better understand the home languages and cultures of our students in order to better serve them. In New York State, we recognize that language and culture are vital resources that can play a key role in a child's academic success. Our monitoring process is aligned to CRS and helps our team identify inclusive classroom environments where all children are supported. We seek to understand, are children encouraged to use the home language in the classroom? Are there visual supports for students labeled in both English and the home language? How are multilingual families engaged? Are students with identified needs and emergent multilingual learners fully integrated into the classroom and program? Do resources and materials include diverse characters? Does the curriculum include content inclusive of diverse backgrounds? And how are programs providing all students with experiences that expose them to diversity in culture and language that can be found within their communities? Culturally responsive sustaining education is grounded in a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. The department released the Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework to support educators in creating student-centered learning environments that honor, reflect, and affirm the student diversity found in our classrooms today. The Office of Early Learning has created a companion guide entitled Implementing the Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework in the Pre-Kindergarten Classroom. This resource is grounded in the 4 principles from the framework that reflect the hallmarks of a quality education, which are a welcoming and affirming environment, high expectations and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional learning. A key feature of this resource is a set of reflection checklists to aid educators in reflection on each domain and how to plan next steps for improving CRS practices in pre-kindergarten. These reflective tools help to assess where one might fall along that growth continuum as an important part of changing practice and making shifts. As an extension of that work, we have released a resource titled Best Practices for Supporting Emergent Multilingual Learners. This resource was designed to support administrators and educators in implementing practices for developing the language and literacy of EMLs through culturally responsive approaches. This resource is a tip sheet that contains actionable ways that administrators and teachers can foster environments where multilingual students thrive. Pictured here are the practices specifically for administrators. Whether it's enhancing the environment, curriculum, and instructional practices, or engaging families, the steps are designed to be practical and applicable. I will now turn it back over to Eric.
So I mentioned this before. We've worked on literacy for many years. In fact, a lot of our work around the standards when we were post-Common Core focused on ensuring that the next generation standards are aligned to research, and especially that reading foundations part is aligned to what research shows is best. And it is aligned to what people are referring to now as the science of reading, which is the bank of research that's many decades old that focuses on phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, building background knowledge, etc. So about a year ago, we kickstarted a series of briefs that we developed in the department that focus on early ages all the way up through high school in literacy. And it includes those essential components that I mentioned. And we worked with Dr. Noni Lasso and Katie Carr from Harvard on this. So it starts with this idea, well, what does this mean by the science of reading? We've heard this term. What does it mean? Is it a program, etc.? And then we have a specific pre-K brief. We have an elementary and then a middle through high school section. And then very importantly, we have a leadership section for literacy, which has some tips for how to, as a school, undergo a review, etc., around literacy and look at your programs. We have also in the department, through the Office of Standards Instruction, published around several months ago a K-3 literacy curriculum review guide, which you can see in the lower left-hand corner of the slide. This is another part of our literacy initiative in which you can look at your whole program in its alignment to these important elements of the science of reading, but also for leadership reflection questions. Additional things that the department are working on with literacy involve a partnership with the Path Forward, which is looking at the way teachers are trained. A very important part for not only for new and upcoming teachers, but for teachers who are already in the pipeline of teaching and may not have had a full amount of literacy training. So we're discussing all of those things with the multi-state group, as well as within our own division of higher education to see what needs to be coming forth for changes to best support current and future teachers. In this work, we most recently, and this is part of a law that was released in the past year, which is Section 818 of the 2024 law, was in the budget noted that the department needed to develop and release pre-kindergarten through grade 3 literacy instructional best practices. So we've worked over the past several months and year to create this research-based guidance, which we just released on January 7th. And each school district, each public school district, and private schools and charter schools are not required to do this, need to review their local instructional practices and curriculum and make an attestation through a survey that we'll release for the department by September that they're aligned to these P through 3 literacy best practices. You can read more about them on our literacy website. We just released a frequently asked questions series of questions. We had 55 questions, I think, from the webinar that we've released. In additional to that, we'll be releasing the attestation information soon, a little bit more about that. In additional work, I know that Elisa's team are working on a series of literacy briefs that specifically relate to language acquisition and English language learners. So put together, all of this constitutes the department's literacy initiative. Much more to come, and we have lots of partners that we work with, the BOCES, the Big Five, and there also is the Governor's Back to Basics program, which involves trainings that you can take through NYSED and so on and so forth. So we're very excited to be moving in this direction to support students, and there will be more to come in the coming months and year. So the next slide shows you that this is a graphic from our literacy work. To have effective instruction, you really need to be student-centered. And teachers know this. I know that you all know this in the room that you're in. To really understand your students, you have to understand not only their culture, but their interests. If we're talking about building background knowledge in reading, understanding a student's background and their interest in certain books or topics can really create great conversations in class, create an intellectual environment where students are asking questions or they feel valued. So all of these pieces that were in the CRS framework that Michelle just presented to you, including having a welcoming, affirming environment to all students, are all the cornerstone of the science of reading. It's the bedrock of this. Understanding students helps you get to the right point, and as well as connecting students to local libraries, having events for parents and families to come in to get access to books or to learn about trainings are all important. So I wanted to share this because this is very important. Another thing that I mentioned in the next slide here is about inquiry-based learning. And we are very excited to share our Science Everywhere initiative, which is an initiative designed for pre-kindergarten children that encourages curiosity, inquiry-based learning, critical thinking, hands-on learning. So all the things you would like to see in a 4-year-old classroom, students digging their hands into dirt, playing with water, looking out and observing things, taking walks. These are all what we're trying to promote with Science Everywhere. So it's not a curriculum or a program. It's a New York State standards aligned initiative that you can use with your local pre-K program. We picked a theme this year, which was birds' nests, because we thought that we're trying to find a theme that conveys science everywhere. So no matter where you are, whether you're in the Bronx, or you're in a suburban school, you're in the Adirondacks, or you're in a family daycare, you should be able to do this by just looking out the window or being right in your neighborhood. So birds and birds' nests are things that touch on every part of our state. So we use that as sort of the theme to hook into this. But what this really does is it helps create a structure of learning where students feel comfortable thinking like a scientist, like a young scientist, where they're asking questions, they feel comfortable, they're looking at things, they're observing, they're doing experiments. As they learn to count, they're doing data. So we're really excited about this. We work with the New York State Museum on this, and we will be promoting another theme to it in the coming year. So for now, it's birds' nests, but we're looking at building or weather, or something that could be the hook to get students talking about science. So this connects really well to the next generation science standards as well. On a side note, we just released, and I don't know if it's in the slides here, but we're very excited about promoting cultural education. So we promoted and put out the P3 Cultural Connections Guide this week, which is about incorporating trips to museums, art, bringing museum folks into the school classroom or the CBO or the daycare to help promote students in arts, local history, and science. So we're very excited about that cultural piece, and we're working hand in hand with the New York State Museum to try to get the museums across the state to be ready for schools to call and say, we want to come. How can we do this for either low cost or no cost? How can we beam in and do a Zoom like this where students could learn about birds or learn about water, et cetera. So these initiatives are meant to spark curiosity and to also help students start to have a lifelong love of those subjects that they might go into as they go up through high school and into college. More resources, we have a lot here. So this is an example of the pre-K literacy resources that we have. We share these when we go out to visit the schools. We have a series of webinars that we put out. The most recent one was on positive behavior, which I think is a wonderful topic. We have a lot of questions about it. We've published behavior guidance on that. We have a video series that we do with recorded webinars. so that we can promote things that you might need to walk through for our application process or UPK. And we also have live events such as our P3 Institute that we've had, and we'll have our third annual Navigating Pre-K Day this March, which is great. I think that we have had breakouts on English language learners. So that is an event for pre-K administrators, teachers, and folks who run universal pre-kindergarten programs. Parents are a very important part of this. And so we're working on ensuring that not only our guidance is translated, but also that it is out there. And then it's in a format that parents can use. Most parents will read things on their phone. They're not going to read an 18-page PDF FAQ that we put out that isn't set up to be visual on a phone. So one thing we were doing is we're using different types of, I have some very talented folks in the Office of Early Learning who like to design. So we try to design some of our documents so that they can be visually appealing to read on a phone, and also are structured in a way where it breaks up the information and isn't a long regulatory language, kind of edu-speak, as we shall say. So we're trying to make progress in this area that we just sort of get to the points, like if you want to know who's eligible for UPK, how are the questions structured, how do you read them, and so on and so forth. So this resource right here is the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages released. And this is another example. We will promote this when we're out in schools, but this is a brochure that's been translated into 10 languages. And this is really important to empower parents to understand and value home language. The resource is on the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages website under EMLs and pre-kindergarten programs webpage. But we also have created our own frequently asked questions, which we find helps because we always get questions about things that we release. And these are topics that are just most frequent. There'll be questions about how do I know if my child's eligible for UPK, and so on and so forth. So those are really important pieces to our work. If it's not out there, then it's not serving its purpose. So next, I hope that you've visited one of our live or watched one of our recorded webinars, but this is our second or third year since I started where we have 3 or 4 events throughout the year. And this year we had a kickoff of Science Everywhere in November. That one is on our website. So it's been recorded. If you've missed it, you can watch it. Our very well-attended Fostering Positive Behavior in Pre-K webinar last week. We had over 1,000 people signed up, which is wonderful. This is a very important topic because schools are struggling, as they've told us, with not just student attendance, but trying to deal with the idea of technology being ubiquitous in our lives and young children coming into programs and not knowing how to let go of the iPad or and to sort of move into a tech-free zone. So there are lots of behavioral pieces, and we start with ways to help the parent, ways to make sure you're ensuring the student still feels safe and welcome, and that you move through ways to help the kid that aren't punitive, and then just try to move the behavior in the right direction so that those are habits throughout school and life. Our next webinar is March 8th. And so this is supporting emergent multilingual learners in pre-K, which I think would be a very interesting topic for this group to sign up for. We hope that you will sign up for this and attend. We have some guests that will be joining us, and we'll walk through the EMO guidance that Michelle shared. And then our last one is really important. Universal Pre-Kindergarten as a program strives to be inclusive. So we have a specific webinar on why this is so important, especially for students with disabilities, to be in the Universal Pre-K program and to be learning alongside typically developing peers so that there are those models and that full experience of students learning each other's cultures, backgrounds, making friends, and so on and so forth. So this webinar will also have some guests, and it'll share some of our schools across the state that have made great progress and breaking down those barriers and ensuring that students with disabilities are fully included in the pre-kindergarten program. On top of this, as I mentioned, we have a couple of other things. We're working on the P3 Institute, which is an event that we had 2 years ago, and then we lost the funding for a year. But this is like a whole pre-kindergarten through grade 3 range of events that we have in a one-day conference with a keynote, like a national speaker, breakouts where we break out into resources that we have like cultural ed or emergent multilingual learners. And we put this on, we don't have a date for this year because we just received the funding again, and we're trying to figure out a date that works best for everyone. If we have it in the summer, there are people who say that they're out and they don't come. If we have it during the school year, we all know that there's never a good time to leave your classroom. So we're trying to find a time that's the least impactful in terms of leaving your kids and being able to come to this. On top of this, just on the UPK side, and then we'll wrap this up. We published a report this past year about how to consolidate the program and make it run more smoothly, for lack of a better phrase. One of the complexities with universal pre-kindergarten is that 2 years ago, we had 6 separate funding streams that school districts needed to negotiate. Some of them had 1, some of them had 4, and some of them you had to spend in order before the other one. So we've made some progress in that, but we also released a report in which we're going to study the per pupil rates for universal pre-kindergarten, but also look at ways to streamline the programming and help schools so they can focus more on the things we presented, the program elements, the curricular elements, working with families, and not have to spend so much time thinking about and worrying about the nuances of the funding part. Very important to be fiscally sound and follow all the rules, but there's an unnecessary level of complexity in universal pre-kindergarten that we're working with the DOB and the governor's office to try to work through. And I think it'll make it so that it'll be smoother. And we're also advocating for a higher per pupil rate for UPK, which many people remind us is nowhere near the K through 12 funding rate. Given that, I wanted to thank Michelle for co-presenting with me and to let you know that in this newsletter here, we have 2 of them. These come out 4 times a year. The P through 3 newsletter just came out this week, and I have an opening part in it where I talk about the importance of the arts and the cultural connections guidance that we just released. But we do have a section in each of these where you can send us a write-up of your program and what you're doing, because we love to feature schools and see what they're doing. So if you have a program that you want to share with us, I encourage you in the email and the newsletter to submit it to us for consideration to be included. And so one of the recent ones was about students working with horses. So it was like a therapeutic connection to equestrian settings, and students were working on farms. It was very interesting, but it was also showed you how exciting it is for the kids to get out of that classroom and to see other parts of the world and nature. So we would love to hear these stories and to have you send them to us so we could consider featuring them. So please read these newsletters and sign up. And this is where you'll find out about all the things we release, our webinars, updates on the UPK process, as well as updates on the budget and UPK funding. So with that, I think we're on our last slide here, and we have a little bit of time for questions, but I wanted to thank you all for listening to this and for hopefully going to some of the links on the slides and checking out these resources that we've worked hard. And I'm very, very proud and happy to have such a wonderful team in the Office of Early Learning. They're spectacular workers, wonderful folks. And if you ever have a question, you know you're going to get somebody who's going to call you back up here, is going to try to help you work through the problem. And that's what we aim to do in my office here, and we will continue that.
Thank you so much. Eric, this was, and Michelle, thank you. This is incredibly helpful information, incredibly timely. I think that we're all grateful that all of these resources you've developed for emergent multilingual learners just shows us that the state understands where our needs are, and it's really wonderful to be, to be hearing about all these new initiatives. I'm very excited, and I think that it only, it really, I think it actually, goes to show that we are going to have that multilingual community that we're all aspiring to achieve, with the help of the early learning department. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
It's excellent. And I wanted to note that our group, we have an article review that our team does where we review trends and we review research. And one of the things that we're talking about recently is the importance of socioeconomic and racial integration in programming, universal pre-kindergarten programming, and the importance of diversity, which it's rooted right in the CRS framework, but also in the communities that you work with. It inclusion as well as diversity are a plus for programs. They're very important things and they set the tone, but we're talking a little bit more about those types of barriers that exist across the country, especially with access to diverse programming for students. So we ask for you to help us kind of spread the word about the importance of these programs and resources.
Thank you. I'm going to take a few questions if there's anybody who wants to
Sure.
ask questions. I have the mic. I come around. Anybody?
I couldn't hear that one, so you might need to get closer to the mic. And can you tell me your name and the RBERN or the school district that you work with? Because I like to hear.
Questions? Oh, I'll go in the back. Eric, can you hear me?
Faintly, but it could just be my computer setup too.
It could be this mic. We're
I'm
gonna
gonna
really
I'm gonna
shout it.
turn the
And you know what?
speakers up.
I'll repeat it. You use the mic and I'll repeat it.
That's good.
I'm a little nervous on a mic, sorry.
Don't
I'm
worry
interest-
about it.
I'm interested in the New York State Portrait of Graduate that you put up. And then you mentioned PBL, the problem-based learning. I'm actually a teacher and I'm just I studied PBL. That's what I did for graduate school. That was our framework, our setup, or rather structure, I guess. But I'm just wondering, like, when you're looking at that portrait of a graduate, and you mentioned PBL, how are we going to implement that in our curriculum, and how is it going to transfer into the classroom? Is that something teachers are going to be kind of looking at switching over to?
Yes, and I think that one of the things that the timeline includes, and I can send back out to Heather afterwards, the link to the Portrait of a Graduate and the New York Inspires website. So it has the timeline. In other words, how they're sort of phasing out. So my daughter's in 9th grade right now in public school. So I automatically look to like where her grade is to figure out where some of the regents' expectations will change and phase out. And some of these new ways of earning credits will phase in, but after they provide guidance on it. So some of this is a couple of years out. And so for inquiry or project-based learning, one just example they talked about during the meetings was having students, instead of taking a final exam that is a series of 50 questions in an essay, they may complete a project instead. So it could be research into I'm just picking an example of something my son did in high school, research into the example of pollution in your city. And you can pick like a certain neighborhood and read articles and do a project on that. Or a student could work with a local like college or medical center to do research. Students in a CTE class could create something with a car that they're working on, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea of measuring student knowledge through that type of hands-on learning. Now, how that looks in the course is highly localized already, because in New York State, curriculum is local control, which means that even though the standards, the outcomes are the same for all students, the way schools reach that is locally implemented. We've had a system of units of study, which are, they call it seat time requirement. It's 180 minutes per week or the equivalent for learning. So part of that is what has created the system of the units of credit. So they're also looking at redefining what that would mean, what courses students would have to take, and where they could kind of go and develop more learning in an area like the arts or CTE. So project and inquiry-based learning was at the root of what they talked about. The way that will be implemented, more will be to come with the guidance from the state, and they have some working groups that are going to publish more guidance on this. But I know there are a lot of questions, but you're on the right track. Project-based learning, that's what they're talking about moving to show competence instead of necessarily a standardized test, although the regents will still be here. And that's something that people are a little confused about.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about this. And I'm just going to say, I did problem-based learning in the Netherlands for one of my masters. And I will say how beneficial it was, because it just holds the students more accountable for their learning instead of just going in and just taking a standard test. And I just love that. So thank you.
Agreed. And I'm sure many of your students also told you how it was exciting for them to see a project through and how to adjust. Like, let's say you're going in a certain direction and you realize, well, this wasn't a good idea. Well, that's life. And it teaches you how to adjust and prepares you for the world of work and also the kind of work you'll do in groups in college. So I'm going to put the link to the New York Inspires press release in here. This will take you to the timeline and the information that I just mentioned.
Thank you. And all of those links will be shared on the Padlet. I'll add all of the additional resources that we've been learning about. Thank you. I have to mention, project-based learning is like my wheelhouse. Like you, I'm so excited that the state recognizes it and is in beginning to integrate it into all the learning experiences. It's amazing. Any other questions we have? Does anyone in the room have a UPK program currently? Oh, okay, good. See, I should have asked that earlier. So this
Yeah, I
is,
can't really see, and part of that's my eyes,
yeah,
but
it's
it's a
quite a
very small
sizable,
little box.
it's a more
Yeah.
than, it seems about
Good.
half or more than
Yes,
half
no,
of the
Long
people in
Island
the
has
room.
a lot of wonderful connections in UPK. We have a lot of questions. Um, I, it's wonderful to hear your feedback about it. So
Yeah, if
anything
you
you want
have
to
any,
share?
do you have any, anything you'd like to share as it relates to the emergent multilingual learners? Have they been addressed currently in your district? Are they being addressed, or is that something that you're looking forward to integrating, or all of these resources that we shared? Yes, hold on.
So we have a universal pre-K program in my district, and we're using Title III funding to support our multilingual learners with an ENL teacher. So although the students aren't identified Ls, we do have someone who
Mhm.
works in the classrooms with the teachers and the students just to provide that language support for them when we can find someone.
That's what was your name in your school?
Nicole, I work in Hewlett-Woodmere.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I visited a school last fall, and one of the pre-K teachers said she had what she considered to be 6 or 7 emergent multilingual learners based on their parents in the early surveys. And she said she really wanted to have a dedicated person in there, but that the school couldn't afford that, and they couldn't. So that's part of what precipitated the idea of these tip sheets that we put together. The idea of if you're a universal pre-kindergarten teacher and you need tips for how to help support language acquisition, that this is a route that you can go in. But we love the model of either a consultant coming in or a dedicated teacher in the programs. And even though it's not required until K in our state, we still think that that's a great way to set a foundation and to set the right tone.
Okay, we have another question over here.
Sure. Make sure you say your name in the school district. I like to hear who's there.
Hi, Evelyn Daza from the Long Beach School District on Long Island.
Excellent. I've been to Long Beach.
Oh, great spot.
Yes.
Restaurants, bars, anyway. So we have UPK. And a couple of years ago, we started giving ENL services just by using all the stuff that we find on your website. And I will say it's been fantastic. It kind of hurts us a little because some of the kids no longer qualify, or if they do qualify for ENL services, when we administer the NYSED, they'll score at the transitioning or expanding level. So they're starting kindergarten way ahead than they would have had they not received services. So the way we administer services is we run on a 6-day cycle, and we provide services 3 days in a 6-day cycle for 30 minutes each day. And it's based on play, chance, and their curriculum, just pre-teaching or reteaching anything in their curriculum.
That's wonderful feedback. And I think one of the things I like to think about is the rich benefits of being multilingual and having multiple languages just enriches students' lives and their cultures. So I think that's wonderful to hear that start is good. And then our resources help. So anything more that you think we could develop, we're open to hearing about it. But
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Imagine, like, it's funny how we think of them as customers, but they test out. So we have, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Any other questions for Eric and Michelle? I cannot thank you enough. This has really been, I just feel so lucky. This has been wonderful. The information that was shared was just so helpful. And of course, we will stay in touch. I know I'm going to give a shout out again for that webinar that's coming up March 5th. That's
yes, please
directly
attend.
related. I'm sorry, 10th?
Please attend. I was going to say, if you
okay.
haven't. And
It
if you
will
want us to come back in like a year to give an update, we can do something like this maybe next spring.
I would love that. Thank you so much for offering that. We're going to take you up on that. So everybody, round of applause, please, for learning.
And thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful, that presentation. And actually, we recorded the presentation, and I'm going to make sure that I'll check with you. I'll share it with you. We can edit, or if we can share it, I will consult with you before posting it. But it was amazing.
Okay, I think
So-
it's fine. I don't think I made too many
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah, me neither.
no, it was fabulous, and really, it was flawless.
But you
Thank
can
you.
edit it out.
Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye. Is it okay if I?
Yep.
Okay.
Have a great meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye now.